Welcome everybody to another Legal Tech Talk session. So I'm delighted to have you all with us today. Starting a couple of minutes, opening up a bit earlier. But today we're going to be sharing perspectives and insights of thought leaders within the legal community, where, as you know, our online series offers a broad range of content, webinars and interviews. Now, today, I'm absolutely delighted that we'll be hosting a live interview and Q&A with Professor Richard Susskind and Bruce Braude, CTO of Deloitte Legal, where they'll be discussing legal technology beyond law firms. Now, before I hand over to our honoured guests, in about 35 minutes, we will be opening the talk to live questions. So please, if you'd like to ask Richard or Bruce a live question, please put your hand up. So in the attendee panel, you'll be able to raise your hand to be able to come in live and ask a question to either of them. Or you can post a question to us in the Q&A below or through the chat. So and if time permits, we'll ask as many questions as we possibly can, but please do put them through that way, and then we will hopefully bring you in live or be able to bring your question in live and ask it directly. Now, without further ado, I'm absolutely delighted to hand over to Professor Richard Susskind. Richard.
Thank you very much, Francis. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this finds you in good health in these difficult times. It's a pleasure to be with you again. Last time in my first Legal Tech Talk, I made the observation that the first 50 years of legal technology, it seemed to me, were devoted to automation rather than transformation. And by that I meant that most of the work that legal technologists were carrying out was in some sense on grafting the technology onto pre-existing ways of working. I was making the claim then that what we needed to do now was use technology to change the way we deliver legal services, indeed to allow us to deliver services in ways that in the past weren't even possible. That for me is the power of technology. I want today to start with something that builds on this 50-year observation, because another thing we've seen in the first 50 years of legal technology is that most of that technology, you may say understandably, but most of it has been technology for lawyers as opposed to technology for clients. And indeed, most legal technology for lawyers has been technology for law firms. And indeed, most legal technology for lawyers and law firms has up until quite recently been technology for the back office. So we talk grandly about reinventing legal services, but any analysis of the amount of money spent in legal technology shows this initial focus on technology for lawyers in law firms and very much in the back office, improving their efficiency, not nearly enough, in my view, about clients. Very small part of the legal tech industry is devoted to delivering systems for direct use, or indeed even indirect use by legal clients themselves, whether these clients be in-house legal departments on the one hand, or individual consumers on the other. Now, I think there's a big contrast here with the world of accountancy and the world of tax. If you look at audit and accountancy, these professions have been heavily automated for decades. And the focus has not just been on the efficiency of the provider, it's been technology used at the cutting edge, at the delivery edge, at the business edge of the firms who are delivering their services. Even more so in tax, if you take the world of tax compliance systems, the whole world of global corporate tax compliance systems, systems that allow businesses around the world to ensure their tax affairs in order to submit their tax information in a compliant form, that is now supported directly by technologies. Historically, that work done by accounting and tax firms, now often done by in-house tax departments. So we've seen a transformation, a move away from technology for the professionals and it's technology for the clients themselves. And many of us in the world of legal technology, over the last couple of decades, have been wondering what would happen if something similar happened in law. What happened if that same mindset that we've seen in audit, we've seen in accountancy, we've seen in tax, if that was brought into the world of legal technology? So legal technology, not simply supporting the back office of law firms, but actually at the cutting edge of legal practice. So that's one of the background questions of the session today. What would happen if the same discipline and approach, methodology of the accounting and tax firms was brought into the legal professions insofar as technology is concerned? The second bit of background in my run-up to introducing today's speaker, I just wanted to reflect on what I've been saying for years about are the main drivers of change in the legal marketplace. And until 2 months ago, I said there were three. The more for less challenge. That's to say that clients are expecting more legal service at less cost, huge pressure on costs over the last couple of decades. The emergence of new providers, Big Four, alternative legal service providers, legal tech startups and more, and technology. I said in 2013, and I still believe this, that these three factors would combine to bring greater change to the practice of law in 2 decades than we'd seen in the previous 2 centuries. But I now have to add a fourth factor, and it's called COVID-19. Because in many ways, but I think in a more subtle and nuanced way than some commentators are suggesting, but in many ways we're seeing an acceleration of the changes in the legal marketplace that are driven by cost, new providers and technology. And in many ways today we're going to discuss all 4 drivers, because I think there can be little doubt when we emerge, as I dearly hope we do soon, from this dreadful state, but there's no question that clients will be under ever greater cost pressures. So the more for less challenge will have intensified. It seems to me that new providers with new offerings in the marketplace, new approaches, new angles will be welcome into the marketplace. And we have represented one of the new providers today in our conversation. Technology, my third driver, of course, at the heart of this conversation and the series that NetLaw Media is hosting. And fourth, this accelerator, COVID-19. So we're going to bring all of these 4 factors together in our discussion. Just a little bit more by way of background before we bring Bruce in, and it's a big build up, it's a long run up, I accept that. But Bruce Braude, he doesn't represent, but he's a representative of one of the big 4 firms, and we know them, they're huge. They together employ more than 1 million professionals. They really are massive. It's said that each of the big 4 spend more in training than the turnover of the largest law firm in the world. So they're really businesses of a very different size. Some of you may know that my first job when I finished doing my research in AI in the 80s, I spent 3 years with what now is Ernst & Young. And I well remember my first day, and it really was my first day, I walked into the elevator and before me there was an advert. It was an extract, in fact, from the Financial Times. And it said about the firm, it said, we don't just help you add up, we also help you multiply. And I thought that was a wonderful little statement which captured this movement that the major accounting firms, the big 8 then, were going through in the 80s, transforming from being accountants primarily to being business advisors more generally. And I think we're seeing a similar kind of transition in the legal world too. But it shows we are, if you want to put it this way, many, many years behind. For the sake of full disclosure, I should say that Deloitte's been a client of mine for 20 years and that Bruce and I are both friends and have been collaborators for about 10 years. I should also say, above all else, that Bruce has just become a father for the 4th time. So it's a particular delight that he's sparing the time to be with us today. Bruce Braude, a very warm welcome to you. You're Chief Technology Officer at Deloitte Legal. I wonder if we could kick off by explaining what that job involves, and a little bit about your own background, how you come to be sitting where you're sitting.
Great, thanks Richard, and it's great to be here with you, and thanks to NetLaw Media for setting up the event. Yeah, just to answer your question a bit about what I'm doing at Deloitte and how I've come to be in this position. So what I'm looking at is technology for Deloitte Legal, and that spans a number of areas. One is technology enabling our legal service delivery. So how we can deliver legal services, which we can speak a bit more about in a little while, our legal services in a more tech-enabled, digitized way with the various benefits that brings. I'm also part of our legal management consulting group, so consulting to clients on their legal operations and legal technology. And then a third part, which ties very much into what Richard mentioned in his introduction, around looking at how we can not just focus on how supporting the lawyers with technology, but creating new digital solutions. I'm working as part of the team with our lawyers, with the technologists more broadly within Deloitte, to look at how we can create new solutions to address legal challenges. And we can speak more about those. In terms of how I've got to be where I am, I'm a technologist by background, a software engineer by background, spent a number of years in financial services, in banking, and then moved probably about 8 years or so ago into a law firm, starting off in very much a business management type of role, divisional COO type of role. And that gave me a really good understanding of the business of law. But what I started seeing with my focus on technology, or my ongoing interest in technology, the potential for technology to have an impact on legal services, legal delivery. Of course, as a new joiner to the legal industry, read Richard's books, and that also got influenced my thinking. And through that and conversations with the senior management at the law firm I was at, moved into a technology strategy role, initially looking at how we could leverage technology at the firm. And as that progressed, and with the rise of legal operations, the whole clock movement, I then started helping clients more and more with their technology discovery, their technology initiatives, and transitioned to very much a client-facing role, consulting to clients on how they could be adopting technology. As that role then progressed, I then moved into what I've just described as my role at Deloitte. So that's just a brief intro. So I've been at Deloitte probably about 8 months or so now. Time's flying. And yeah, I can't believe it's 8 months.
Yes, and along comes COVID, very sadly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not what we've been planning for. So how's the organization coped in terms of its move from the office to essentially remote and home working?
Yeah, it's been pretty seamless. And I think Deloitte and other similar organizations are probably quite fortunate, because we have got such a large workforce, very distributed, very much being on site at clients, working remotely anyway. So our core infrastructure, our core technology was very much set up for working remotely. So it was pretty much a matter of picking up my laptop, going home and connecting in. So from a tech perspective, it stood up very well. Of course, we've all had to adjust to how we work. So it's no longer about meetings in offices and someone potentially dialing in or video conferencing in. But as everyone on the call is very familiar, we're now in this online video, whether it's Zoom or Teams, etc., environment. And yeah, I think it's been an experience for everyone, but I think we've all adjusted very well.
Yes, it's been a remarkable period.
Yeah.
Adaptability of people I found especially comment worthy, that people fairly seamlessly, and I think it's because, as you say, for many firms, the infrastructure was there anyway, but it was not that hard for many organizations. I appreciate it difficult for some, but for many organizations to carry on working as they were, except of course that the work is not necessarily there anymore, because in the field, for example, of M&A or real estate, we're seeing
Sure.
a great dip in the market. Nonetheless, operationally, and I think clients have said the same, the transition to home seems to have worked well. And I'd be surprised if one of the major professional firms in the world wouldn't be able to cope with that transition. But let's focus, because it really is, I think, what people have gathered here together to hear about in Deloitte Legal. What is Deloitte Legal? What's its central strategy? I think the market has for some years been expecting the Big Four incursion into legal, but tell us a little bit more about how Deloitte are going about this, and then we can turn to technology. But just in the first instance, what you're about and what your strategy is.
Sure, absolutely. So what we're looking to do is, we've seen what we believe is an unmet need in the market, to bring together what we see the best components of what a law firm would bring, what a managed service provider would bring, what technology brings, what consulting brings, bringing this all together into a very integrated and comprehensive offering that brings together those strands to offer holistic solutions to clients, combining all of those components. So what Deloitte Legal consists of, we've got a few key, if I could call it, service lines. The one is legal advisory work, so giving clients legal advice in specific areas of focus, and those areas are growing as we build out Deloitte Legal. So, but that's the legal advisory side of things. Very much combined with that is our managed legal services. So offering clients more higher volume, repeatable, process-oriented, very tech-enabled solutions, whether it's project-oriented work, such as contract repapering exercises driven by regulatory changes, etc., or business as usual managed services, so business as usual commercial contracting or other areas of managed services. And then the third strand that forms part of our overall offering is the consulting piece, our legal management consulting to clients on, of course, technology, but far broader than that, legal risk management, legal strategy, operating models, technology, data analytics, and bringing that all together for the client. And our key, one of our key propositions is to seamlessly link each of those strands. So in a consolidated and comprehensive way, we'll offer clients the legal advice, the managed services, the consulting. And another key element before we get onto the technology is the multidisciplinary approach beyond legal. So those are the key strands within legal, but then of course we can draw on and they draw on us, the other disciplines within Deloitte, whether it's financial advisory or risk advisory or consulting, working hand in hand with them, us bringing the legal side of things, them bringing their areas of expertise to offer clients solutions to whatever their business challenges are or business needs are. And then on the technology piece, our view is technology pervades all of that, and we can speak more about how technology supports each of those areas and some of the key things we're focusing on the technology side. But in terms of the business as a whole, it's those key strands. And another element, of course, is the global reach. We're looking at things here, obviously, in the UK, but I'm sure there are plenty of you on the call, or hopefully there are plenty of you on the call internationally. And Deloitte Legal is a very international organization. We've got offices, I don't remember the exact number, but in most jurisdictions out there. So a very international offering to clients.
Okay, so fundamentally, you've got legal advice, you've got managed services, and you've got a form of management consulting for in-house legal departments. The differentiators are the global reach on the one hand and the multidisciplinary approach on the other. But a third surely.
And technology, of course.
Technology, indeed, yes. So where does technology fit into this? How do you see it as enabling and differentiating you? And what is your role in all of that?
So technology spans all of those areas. So on the legal advisory side, of course, using technology to support our lawyers using technology to drive efficiency, to give our clients a digital experience, so online portals, knowledge sharing, etc., for our clients. So supporting the legal advisory and managed service side, whether it's driving efficiency, collecting and informing our clients with more data, giving them a better customer experience. So supporting the legal delivery. On the management consulting side, of course, consulting to clients on technology and how they use technology and how the two come together. It's not just about the client's technology and our technology, but how it all interfaces and comes together as a end-to-end service delivery, data flows, integration. And then an area that we're looking at that spans all of this is, coming back to Richard's original point, is digital solutions, how we can create new solutions to effectively provide legal services, but it's not just about making our lawyers more efficient or exposing their deliverables through some type of portal, but creating totally new solutions to address legal needs through the use of technology. And where I think Deloitte's, some of the key differentiators that I found in joining Deloitte, and for me as a technologist coming into Deloitte, I've mentioned this, I used this analogy before, that it was like a kid coming into a toy shop. Here I am, a technologist in the legal space, but coming into Deloitte, one of the leading technology consultancies out there. It's, just was a mind-blowing experience. And some of the key differentiators is, one, our general technology capabilities. Deloitte, like I say, is a leading consultancy. We've got alliances with many of the world's leading tech companies. And as part of our DNA, as Richard touched on when he was introducing the Big Four, to combine technology with our advisory work. So whether it's in risk advisory, audit, etc., we're finding technologists, or I found technologists embedded in each of those service lines. And it's never just about, well, how can we give clients advice? It's how can we combine it with technology to create new solutions? It's been described that Deloitte is a collection of a whole lot of entrepreneurial initiatives that combine the areas of expertise, whichever they may be in the different service lines, and technology to create digital assets, to create new propositions to take to clients. And of course, that's what we're going to and are looking to do in legal. There have been some good successes already, even before my time, and we're looking to do more of that and draw on the extensive technology capabilities across the network.
And how then does that differ from major law firms? Because we've seen, and I know it's early days, but in some of the leading law firms, certainly all of them provide legal services. Many of them have their own dedicated low-cost service centers, and a few, admittedly less, are making early attempts at delivering consulting services. But what's the difference, do you find, from a technology point of view? You come into this organization, first of all, there's about 250,000 of you. How do you find out who's doing what? How do you capture that and point it in the direction of legal? Because in a way, you're not really taking over a going concern. You're building this from scratch. So what's your approach? How have you coped with this?
Yeah, I mean, interesting question. So first on how we, well, I guess I'll combine it in how we differentiate from a law firm, or how this is different to what law firms are doing, and how I've managed to cope with it coming into the organization. So I think the big differentiator is just the scale of it. So the size of the organization, the scale of our technology expertise. I mean, one figure that I managed to find, and it's quite hard to pin down, well, what's the scale of our technology capabilities, because we've got technologists embedded in each of our service lines with each of our practice areas across Deloitte, helping create these digital solutions. But the figure that I managed to find is that we've got over 4,500 data scientists in Deloitte that I can draw on. We've got centers of excellence, whether it's in blockchain, artificial intelligence, any other types of technologies. And these centers of excellence are not only, well, they primarily to consult to clients, so really leading client-facing consultancies, but of course they then also work with teams such as my team, looking at how we can create solutions for legal. So it's these centers of excellence, the scale of it, and the relationships that we've got with tech companies out there. I mean, it's public information that Deloitte's got alliances with the likes of Google, Amazon, Apple, and a vast number of other leading technology companies. And when it's looking at creating solutions, it's around, well, how can we work with the Deloitte consultants, and how can we also partner with these tech companies? Just as a few examples, I'm currently looking at a solution for a specific area of law that we're looking at incorporating some workflows, some chatbots, etc. And in a way, the big challenge, which comes to your point, in Richard, of however I managed to deal with it coming to the organization, is just putting out some feelers to contacts that I've built up since joining. There are probably 4 different areas, centers of expertise in chatbots that I can partner with to create solutions. So I think it's that type of thing where it differentiates from a law firm, where just within a day, putting out a few emails, I've got 4 teams and they want to be involved in projects. So they effectively, not officially competing, but they all looking to work with me on these solutions, and they're all top experts in that specific area. So it's the scale of it. Another example, we had a client workshop last week looking at legal operations and legal tech, and they were asking about knowledge management. And again, put out the feelers into the network, and I found that we've got a knowledge management center of excellence in Israel, leveraging leading AI technology plus best practice expertise in knowledge management. Over 100 people sitting in a center of excellence there. And those are teams that I can now draw on and bring into the legal field to create these types of solutions. So I think it's just the scale of the expertise and this openness to collaborate.
The scale is remarkable, but actually I wanted to go back to something you said earlier, which in some ways interests me more, and that's the embeddedness of it. Because several times you've said that the technologists, as it were, don't sit apart, they are part of the practices themselves. And I think there's a distinction, not with all law firms, but with many law firms. Are technologists regarded as part of the team, or are they on the edge? Are they integrated? Culturally, how does that work?
Oh, there's no differentiation. It's not, I think there's no technologists and business people, etc. There just isn't that. The technologists are part of the business. I mean, for example, in our consulting practice, the technologists are leading that business. I mean, it's a large part is technology consulting, but equally whether in legal, risk advisory, financial advisory, because of the focus on leveraging tech, creating tech solutions, or combining tech and the advisory side of things, I mean, in any pitch, in any team, there'll be a number of partners involved who are technologists. The leading partners in a lot of the areas have got strong experience, whether it's in data analytics, other types of technology, going to clients as part of the team. So it's very much embedded. And back to my point of not being able to get a number of, put a number on what the size of our tech capability is, it's because it's so embedded, and within each team, they're just technologists, and there's technologists and business and what can I call it, subject matter experts in those areas, but equally those subject matter experts are very clued up on technology too because of this focus on it.
So I suppose you've got the advantage of almost starting with a blank sheet of paper. On the other hand, in the legal market, a lot of the successful work done by law firms is based on big relationships. So for those who are perhaps listening in and think, what's the future of law firms? You came from a law firm yourself. I'm sure you would agree that the legal marketplace is not shrinking. That's to say, in a more complex work, there's more need for legal services. It isn't, or are you saying it perhaps is, a question of the big four and others taking over the legal market, or are they just instead providing a different sort of service?
I think it's very much a different sort of service. And as everyone on the call will know, there are different types of legal work, different levels of complexity, different ways of addressing legal problems. And certain things law firms will be more focused on, certain things the likes of Deloitte will be more focused on. And it's a big market. Yes, it is about relationships. We are, of course, looking at building our relationships. Deloitte as an organization has got phenomenal relationships with clients, but we're also now building this as a small legal function, building it in legal. But I think another key point is we see in terms of working with law firms, yes, in some respects, of course, we are competing, but in other respects, we see the opportunity to collaborate with law firms where we bring certain strengths to the table around technology, around consulting capabilities. Law firms, of course, have got great strengths in terms of their legal expertise, legal advisory capabilities. And in the right types of situations, we see the opportunity, and we are in discussions with some law firms around how we can collaborate and go to market together in certain areas of law with certain propositions. So we see it as a win-win situation, and yeah, very open to collaborating with law firms and bringing together our respective strengths.
So what then has changed in light of the crisis? It's interesting, I should just say by way of background, that Bruce, you were one of the opening speakers at the physical Net Law Media British Legal Technology Forum in March, on the 11th of March. And I think for many of us, that was the last big event we attended. We all sensed there was something shocking in the offing, but I didn't really think had any deeper insight into what it would be like to be locked down. What's changing your own strategy and your own priorities in light of the crisis within Deloitte Legal with special reference to technology?
So yeah, I think in the short term, what we've seen is clients are very now focused because of the pressures of that the crisis is bringing, budgetary constraints, etc. Their focus is far less now on what could I call it, more exploratory types of opportunities, but very focused on short-term, strong business cases, strong business benefits, what they can do in the short term to address particular needs, whether it's cost savings, efficiency, etc. But very much more controlled in terms of spend, and very more focused on strong business cases and very tried and tested opportunities, not looking to take risk and experiment, if I can use that term. So that's in the short term. I think longer term, what I'm seeing is in conversations with clients, that what I think the crisis has shown is how adaptable we can be, how we can change with technology. If I think back to talking to law firms, and not law firms, lawyers, and I'm generalizing here, I'm not speaking about any specific firm, whether Deloitte or elsewhere, but talking to lawyers, and even if I think back to example where I was involved with talking to lawyers about them moving from fixed offices to open plan, and all the debate around, well, I need my office and I need to close the door and I need my filing cabinet, etc. And then you move them to open plan. If we had gone to lawyers in January and said, well, in a matter of weeks, you're going to be working from home for the foreseeable future, you won't have any of your physical infrastructure with you, they would have laughed and they would have given every excuse of how it couldn't be done. And in a way, we've now proven that it can be done. And I think what we're seeing, and I think what we'll see more of, is lawyers being far more open-minded to, and whether it's clients or law firm lawyers within the firms that we respectively represent, those on the call and myself, being far more open-minded to trying new things because they see how things can be done. And I think we'll see an increased pace of change, both with our clients and in terms of legal service delivery. What are we doing? Yeah, helping clients in the immediate term with their current challenges. So helping them through the crisis, helping them with their particular challenges on the legal advisory side, on the operational side, and then working with them to help them, and this isn't just about tech, it's helping them look at, well, what are the risks? How do they emerge from the crisis? How do they transition? And again, it's about, and I can't go into too much detail, but there's a particular tech idea I'm working on with some of our lawyers, very much around the crisis and helping clients transition through it, combining, and this goes to the example of how we combine the different pillars of Deloitte Legal, combining our legal expertise, some managed service capabilities and tech to offer our clients a solution in a particular area. So we're very much there to help and support our clients through the change. And then I think longer term, it's about working with our clients to transition even more around digital transformation, which I think will be accelerated because of the crisis.
Yes, I was going to ask you, and this really my final question before we take questions from the audience, as it were. Most people listening in, I suspect, are legal technologists or legal technology enthusiasts. And the question on many of our minds is what we think the longer term impact of the COVID crisis will be on the uptake and development and direction of legal technology. What's your current thinking on that?
So I think it will accelerate it just because of this new open-mindedness that I think everyone now has to technology. The idea that lawyers and clients are negotiating on platforms such as Zoom. Of course, there's the online courts, which I mean, you're obviously the expert on, and we're seeing how things are transitioning, and I think people are adapting. So I think there's going to be far more openness to it, but I think there's also going to be a stronger need for it, of course. I don't think our working patterns are going to go back to what they were pre-crisis in terms of us all just going back into the office. So there'll be a growing interest on digital collaboration platforms, how we collaborate within an organization, across organizations. So I think there'll be a far bigger focus on that. Already we've obviously seen it, whether it's just video platforms or things we've been exploring, how to facilitate workshops, etc., using various online collaboration tools. So we'll see a greater focus on platforms. I think we'll see a greater focus on data analytics, both to drive optimization, but also for risk management. We're in a time of unprecedented change, and general counsel will need information or data to drive their decision making, how to structure their legal function, how to manage risk. And I think there'll be a far greater focus. These are trends that were already in place, but I think it'll accelerate. Far greater interest in data, management information. You've got dispersed teams, harder to manage. You need data, metrics, etc., on them, on contracts, on legal matters, on litigation. I think there'll be a far bigger focus on that. And I think what we'll also see, and I was giving this some thought around managed services, where if I just think of myself and the fact that we've all moved to virtual working now, I think has further brought down the barriers in terms of where people are located. So in the past, if you think, okay, we've got our London team and our team wherever else, well, now it's almost, we're all just on Zoom, we get together. I'm far less concerned. I was talking to a colleague the other day about some new initiative, and they said, oh, by the way, just to let you know, I hope it doesn't matter, I'm in the Leeds office or Birmingham office. And I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, you're on Zoom and we're all on Zoom, so it doesn't matter where you are. And I think that mindset will proliferate within organizations. So I think we'll see far more fluid, flexible working across locations. But I think it'll also open up the mindset to managed service type of provision, where this idea of, well, if we're using lawyers, whether they're in our organization and sitting with us or sitting in another organization, we're all working from home virtually or working on virtual collaboration platforms. I think this mindset of us and them will be far less, and I think we'll see far more cross-organization collaboration, whether it's managed services or other types. So yeah, I think we're going into far more of a digitized world, and I think it's going to accelerate, or it's already accelerating.
Thanks very much. I think we can return now. Bruce, thank you. I should say, give you a warmer thank you. Thank you so much for so clearly and openly answering these questions. What I think's crucial about these sessions, and where Zoom's very helpful, is we could actually respond to those who are listening around the country, indeed around the world. So I wonder now if I could return to Francis, who will actually be chairing the Q&A and bringing questions to both of us actually to answer. Francis, back to you in our, I was going to say our studio, but I don't know which studio.
Well, our virtual studio, how's that? Since, as Bruce quite rightly said, you know, we're now all on one platform, so it's wonderful where we can reach. So thank you, Bruce and Richard. So we've got some questions which are coming through. So first of all, one of the questions which I think could be to both of you actually. So Bruce and yourself, Richard, how to prepare a small boutique law firm to adapt with technology? Do we even need to adapt to this change?
Why don't I have a go first? I was conscious when listening to Bruce that you could react in a number of ways if you were a small practice, or indeed any kind of practice in law. You could think, oh my goodness, this is overwhelming. They outgun us in terms of their resources and so forth. And then I was reflecting, actually, as a professional myself, I'm a sole practitioner. And what you enjoy as a smaller business is a greater flexibility, a greater adaptability. You can be far more nimble. You can change your business model. You can pivot overnight. And so I wouldn't want people listening in to think that the coming of Deloitte and the other big four somehow signals the end of smaller firms, because I think there will, for many years yet, be a need for the trusted advisor who can work often with a small organization who's perhaps known the family who run that business for many years, who can adapt to the particular changes of the particular individuals without having any kind of bureaucratic drag, who can introduce technology overnight. I always reflect that when I worked around 2000, I was working with two magic circle firms, and they both introduced online deal rooms, and it cost them each about £1 million to introduce them. You can use basic off-the-shelf technology now, open source software, and do it for nothing. And so for many small firms who say, oh, the expense of the technology is beyond this, in fact, the technology itself is no longer really the obstacle. It's having the time to introduce the changes. But be in no doubt, no matter how well organized major organizations are, they do suffer, and this is no disrespect to anyone, but they suffer from supertanker syndrome. It's quite difficult to change direction quickly, even indeed to stop quickly. And so that's what the small firms need to be thinking about. How can we take advantage of the low cost, no cost software and systems that are available? How can we scan the market, pick up the great ideas that are coming from others, and execute and implement more quickly than the larger firms that have this organizational drag? Bruce, I didn't know if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if I think of even just a platform such as Office 365, Microsoft Teams, etc., which obviously huge organizations are using, but for a small law firm to go and take out a subscription for their law firms, it's far easier than implementing enterprise software 5-10 years ago where it was on-premise, etc. I think the growing acceptance, and I'm obviously not opining whether one should or shouldn't be using the cloud, but I think we all agree there's a growing acceptance of it, means that using these cloud type of platforms, software as a service, subscription, smaller firms can get up and running or can adapt pretty quickly. And yeah, so I totally agree. I think in some respects it's easier and one can be nimble. So yeah, but I think the big change is SaaS and the cloud that makes that doable.
Just to add to that also, though, that in a way technology is a great equalizer, and we've seen this during COVID, haven't we? That you're a part of Deloitte, I'm a one-man band, but we're both sitting here using the same enabling technology. But I would say this, that the smaller firm might decide, well, we're going to invest in higher definition cameras like Francis, in fact, uses, or we might have a false background of books. It's not a false background, but we can, as a smaller firm, create perhaps a better user experience than a larger firm because we don't need to scale it. So I do want to stress and encourage small firms that this is the era of the small, nimble, entrepreneurial lawyer, as well as the era for the major new players in the market. For both categories of individual and organization, however, it's all about facing your clients, understanding their changing needs, and responding in the context of what is a very volatile time. So there's no, the final point was there's no greater knowledge, as it were, within a major organization of how to handle a pandemic than there is in a small organization. I say that to my children as well. I've not lived through a pandemic before. This is new to all of us. Francis, other questions?
Oh, yes, we're getting quite a fair few coming through. So I'm going to pick one which is more to do with law tech backlash, potentially. So I thought it would be quite interesting to throw it into the mix here. This is from Jamie Fraser. So thank you, Jamie. Do you ever worry that there might be a law tech backlash coming from clients who feel an innovation pressure from their business to sign up some AI, but which isn't relevant or properly implemented?
I'm happy to take that. Hi, Jamie, hope you're well. So I think to some extent we're already seeing that. When I'm talking to clients, I think they've moved past this idea of wanting the latest flashy piece of law tech or legal tech. What they're looking for is more trusted solutions, more proven solutions. Some of them are willing to, and putting aside the impact of COVID, but some of them are willing to experiment more, but at the same time, they want to see that it's proven results, proven business cases. What I'm also seeing along the lines of, in a similar line, is that corporates starting to look at how they can leverage their existing enterprise software that is not legal tech, but just general technology, their ERP systems, etc., to support the legal function in a better way too. So looking at reuse of existing tech rather than specifically law tech. But I think to a fair extent, there's been that pushback already. Of course, there's still opportunity and great opportunity for legal tech startups and law firms, including ourselves, looking at engaging with those startups to see how we can collaborate and take things to market together. But from the client or corporate legal department perspective, I think that yeah, they've moved a bit past that and almost want the law firms or Big Four, Deloitte, to be coming to them in conjunction with the tech companies to address how it can solve a problem or a challenge, rather than just being a piece of tech on its own.
Thanks. I think Jamie's question is a really important one. I do worry about this. I worry, for example, in the world of AI, of which I, in one way or another, have been part for decades, but the recent upsurge of interest and enthusiasm in AI, I think there's a lot of hype, and in the short run, it seems to be that the claims that are being made are largely exaggerated. Actually, though, in contrast, I think a lot of the long-term claims are being understated. So I don't think AI is going to change the legal world over the next 18 months, as some commentators and law firms would say. But then again, I think it will transform the legal marketplace within the next decade. But it does the legal tech industry no use, I don't think, if the claims are unsubstantiated, the software is licensed and people are disappointed in the results. I think it's also worth remembering that in the end, clients actually don't want AI innovation or the like per se. What they want is the benefits and outcomes that AI and innovation they understand will lead to. So clients are wanting a lower cost service of a certain quality. If that can be better achieved through AI and innovation, they're interested, but clients shouldn't be interested in the technology for its own sake, and they shouldn't be interested in innovation for its own sake. But the broader point you raised, I think, is an important one, and it's a message to everyone who's listening in, that the credibility, not just of your own organization, but of legal technology generally, rests on the claims we made, and we have to make sure, as a professional group, we're responsible in the predictions we make. And that might sound rich coming from me, who spent a whole life making predictions, but mine are usually quite guarded and long-term. And I certainly don't believe, for example, that AI is transforming and replacing lawyers in the next few weeks. And interestingly, as a footnote, to some extent, I think, although I completely agree with Bruce's general point about the acceleration of the uptake of some technologies, home working, communication, collaboration software, and I also agree that we are finding clients and lawyers are more open to technology. I think for a while you'll see a dip in interest in some of the more exotic technologies. I think they'll come back, and actually they'll come back at a faster rate. But as people are muddling their way through this crisis, no one's really screaming about innovation in AI just now. People are wondering how they can keep their business afloat and keep things stable. So I think the question comes at a good time. Thank you, Jamie.
So I'm going to try and get through. We're getting lots of questions, so I don't know if we're going to be able to get through all of them, but we'll do our best. So this is from Deborah Pressman. So thank you, Deborah. Legal firms may be ready and willing to accept digital transformation. She's put in no choice, really. But how do we reconcile this private super acceleration with a slower pace of public institutions, such as government institutions, adopting a more user-focused digital service in law and conflict resolution and getting the tech right?
Well, maybe I'll have a go at that. And if I understood that there was an imbalance being, sorry, what the name of the questioner was?
Deborah Pressman.
Deborah, I think you were pointing to the apparent disparity in enthusiasm and capability of technology between the private sector and the public sector. And I might have agreed with that 2 months ago, but I think what we've seen in the court system over the last couple of months, both here and overseas, and for those of you who are interested in this, have a look at the website www.remotecourts.org, which charts almost 50 different countries and their adoption of alternatives to physical court systems. What we've seen, and it echoes something that Bruce mentioned, is a remarkable adaptability even in the public sector. Because the reality is, if access to justice is to be maintained and in turn the rule of law is to be maintained, governments and judiciaries had to join forces and put in place the processes, the procedures, as well as the quite primitive technologies, but a willingness to allow hearings to be done either by audio or by video or even in paper form. And so to some extent, I think your question has been answered, that if the pressure is sufficient, we actually can see the public sector move at remarkable speed. We've also seen that, for example, in some, but I accept not all, but in some of the government's financial support schemes, where going online, registering, being verified by reference to your passport, evaluations being made on the strength of 3 years of tax returns, all done in a matter of seconds. Where the pressure is on, it does seem we have both the will and the technological capability. My worry is that when we return, as I say again, as I duly hope we will soon, to some sense of normality, that on the one hand, it will be important not simply to say, the future is here, we can leave it in place. We need to evaluate what has been this remarkable experiment and pilot. We need to take advantage of what we know works well. We need to see where we can improve. But how on earth we do it, I often say it's hard to change the wheel in a moving car. How you do that while still delivering this same public service, it will be very difficult, for example, for the courts. And so I worry that when the courts around the world have to meet the challenge of the backlog that's been created by COVID, they'll perhaps lose the impetus and lose this agility and rapidity, which has been unusual, I accept, over this period. So it's up to people like me and others to keep the pressure going, say, we found a way of increasing access to justice and lowering the costs of court services. For goodness sake, let's make sure we take advantage of it.
So I've got a question for Bruce. This is coming in for Jodie, Jodie Jansen. So thank you, Jodie. How do you get the ideas for the solutions, and how do you score these solutions to understand if it's worth developing?
Hi, Jodie. Great question. Yeah, that's probably out of everything that keeps me awake at night, it's probably that. I mean, as I described, Deloitte's a great place in terms of tech, and coming into Deloitte with all this tech capability, it's like, okay, wow, we've got all this great tech. What are we going to build? And it's how to find those ideas. And yeah, it's something that I'm thinking about a lot. I think there's a few thoughts, really. I think the one key area is engaging with clients. So talking to clients, understanding their challenges, understanding what they're grappling with, what ideas they may have. I always find that clients have always got good ideas, whether they're worth developing or not, we can come to in a second. But I'd say the best way is engaging with clients. Of course, engaging with internal lawyers too is essential. And as part of that, it's one needs to educate the lawyers as to the art of the possible, how to look at this whole new way of potentially delivering legal solutions. It's not just about them giving advice as they have for however many years to date and adding on a bit of tech, but it's looking at creating totally new solutions. So it's educating them as the art of the possible, giving them examples. I think as you start showing lawyers examples in other practice areas or even what other firms have done, it then sparks their thinking around, okay, could we do something similar for this or that or whatever their area may be. So I think it's a combination of those. And I think a third area is change in the market. So change in the market, whether it's regulatory change, COVID, etc., brings opportunities to create new solutions. The change in itself brings everyone out of the status quo and inertia, and it's a great opportunity to then try and put in a new solution. So I think a combination of all of those, but yeah, something I think about all the time. How to then evaluate them? Of course, the usual, as with any tech idea or business case, etc. But I'd say the one key thing, in my opinion, and something I learned the hard way, is one needs to engage with clients, test the thinking with them, build minimally viable products with them, and build iteratively with clients. Because, and as I learned the hard way, one can go off and build a solution thinking everyone's going to love it, think it's going to change the world, and then you've missed some key point of it, and the market doesn't really want it. So it's very much around building iteratively with clients. And if one is getting clients, if you're taking ideas to clients and they're liking it, they're enthusiastic about it, then there's of course far more to explore. And then one needs to get into things such as the feasibility of building it, the cost, the return on investment, etc. But the key thing is their client interest and in the idea. And in the early days, I'd always think, you know, you don't want to go and take the great idea to the client. It's may leak out. You want to keep it to yourself and, you know, storm the market with it. But I think the risks of that are far greater than the risk of it leaking out. And with most great ideas, it's more about the execution and getting it right than some wonderful brainstorm idea that that no one's thought of. So I think the key thing is go out and test it with clients, get their input, and then build iteratively with them. I think it de-risks it, and it's the best way to test if it's feasible.
Can I just add one response to that, Francis? One of the mistakes I think people make, and one of the limitations of legal technology, is to think that you look around your organization and look for some inefficiencies and see how you can use technology to sit on top of an inefficient process and take some cost out or lend it a bit of speed. If you're really wanting something that's going to make a difference in the marketplace, I believe you need to think backwards. And this echoes what Bruce is saying to some extent. Think backwards from the problems that clients have and use technology to allow you to move to the market with solutions to problems, rather solutions enabled by technology, preferably that couldn't be delivered without technology, but manifestly not an automation of an existing inefficiency, a new approach to a recognized problem. And so the innovation is not in some sense in creating a problem, it's identifying your client's biggest problems and coming up with new ways of solving them. So you work backwards from clients' problems rather than forwards from automating what you have today.
Thank you for that, Richard and Bruce. I've got another question. This is going to be for both of you because it's an interesting one for both of your thoughts. So this is from Pavel Klimov. So thank you, Pavel. Technology is used in many business sectors, but without a tech label associated with such use in that sector, do you think LegalTech or LawTech label helps or hinders a wider adoption of technology in the legal sector?
That's an interesting one. I would like to see a world in which people don't really distinguish between legal practice and the courts and judicial activity on the one hand and technology on the other, so seamlessly integrated is technology with these activities. You know, that old thing that every business is an internet business, every business is a technology business. The harsh reality, though, is that certainly most senior lawyers have no real experience, exposure to technology, and do look upon it as something slightly foreign and wonder how best it can be put alongside what it is they do. But I think in future generations, it'll be far harder to disentangle technology from legal practice. So if you take my own particular main interest just now, the whole idea of remote courts and online courts and so forth, we're seeing the emergence of an architecture to courts which is so intrinsically based in technology that it will look strange in the future to be talking about phrases like online courts and remote courts. That'll just be the courts, and court service will be delivered sometimes in person and sometimes essentially through people's machines. So I think the language of legal technology in a way is temporary. It's temporary. It's been temporary for half a century. But I think the next generation, the emerging law students and young lawyers will, in the same way as it's interesting, young kids don't often talk about going onto the internet in the same way as people of my age. You're going on there. It's like getting in there as an adventurer, stepping into the car and driving somewhere. It's just part of the life they lead. And I think in the same sense, we won't be thinking of using legal technology. It'll be inextricably woven into legal practice and court service in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Richard says. And just to add, I think, yeah, it is probably a temporary thing and it will eventually just become part of what we do. But I think it's been very helpful over the last few years, this whole legal tech movement, the growth of legal tech. When did it start? Probably, I mean, it's been around for a lot longer, but the real big movement, I don't know, probably say 2015, give or take, and the big focus on legal tech, I think it's created a lot of awareness in the market, focus in the market, or in the industry, should I say, on technology, the adoption of technology. There has been some, what could I call it, downside to it, what Richard touched on earlier about the unnecessary hype around it. So I think there has been, of course, some hype around it. But I think all in all, it's when we see some, like, for example, even this talk and a whole lot of the communities that have arisen around the whole legal tech movement, I think it's helped a lot in terms of creating some momentum and adoption and focus, and the whole legal tech startup community. I think it's been really helpful over the last few years in driving it forward and driving change. But yeah, as it progresses further, it'll just become part of how we do things. But I do think it's been good for the industry all in all over the last few years.
So we've got a couple coming in for about focusing on the smaller firms, because a lot of discussion is about large law and where that sits within the larger tier firms. So I'm going to sort of bring in a couple of questions here, which I thought were good to be able to voice live. So this is from Paul, and again, both views would be fantastic. So the emphasis in discussion is heavily biased towards large law firms and legal service providers. What can core focuses be for SME scale firms who may be interacting with small businesses and individuals whose resources are therefore limited, but whose ability to adopt and even pivot quickly can also be a feature?
Let me start off, and if an apology is due, bringing Deloitte in for an interview, the discussion tend to go on the big side, as it were, but it's not for a second to suggest that the needs of smaller organizations are any less important. I think SMEs face a particular challenge, that they are businesses, they have a whole set of rights and obligations, entitlements, they work within complex compliance structures, and yet very few can afford their own legal capability. Very few also say they can afford conventional external providers. And so there is a need for a different way of meeting the legal needs of SMEs. Now, my own view on this is, and I think it's more of a challenge than simply streamlining conventional legal work, is that somehow we have to find ways of productizing, of commoditizing, of standardizing a lot of the common legal issues that many SMEs have. Because most of the issues that SMEs face, legal issues, are issues that others have faced in the past. So it seems to me that the opportunity here is some form of collaboration, that we create some kind of legal environment, some kind of legal network or platform that allows people to share legal expertise. Now, that might be driven and supported by one small law firm, or might be offered by a number of law firms in combination. But I don't think the standard one-to-one consultative advisory service billed by the hour, one small law firm to one small business, is going to be sustainable. We have to find ways of taking the cost out. And either you become more, I often say you either reduce the costs or you share the costs. And so the option that appeals to me, forgetting for a while about the provider, from the point of view of the clients, wouldn't it be wonderful if clients could share the costs of common legal problems on some kind of platform? Now, that actually is quite an attractive proposition to big law firms as well as small law firms. And to some extent, this could be very disruptive for small firms because historically, most major law firms haven't found SMEs especially attractive as clients because they aren't of the scale. They don't have the kind of problems and difficulties that justify the expense and the approach that these major firms take. But if you can imagine, say, a community of 1,000 people in a particular sector who are each prepared to put in a few £1,000s a year for a platform, you suddenly get a proposition that would be attractive to major firms as well. But I say again that smaller firms, if they're entrepreneurial enough, should be nimble enough to think, actually, that's something we can do. I advise 100 SMEs, let's bring 50 of them under the umbrella and see what I can do on a shared cost basis. It's only one strategy, but it's an example of thinking differently. It's not how do we streamline and improve and take the costs out of a conventional way of working. It's how can we use technology to allow clients to have their legal needs met, but in a different way. It won't perhaps be the quality of service of the traditional one-to-one service, but often good enough is good enough. And through some platform, I think we can deliver a good enough legal service to SMEs. So you got to be off the starting blocks pretty quick there to keep your conventional clients, and you have to work differently.
Yeah, and from my side, I mean, I think great input there from Richard. And then I think in terms of the, I guess, the shorter term challenges for smaller law firms, I think it goes back to what I said earlier around adopting cloud type of platforms. Yes, it's not, that in itself is not going to transform your business model, but I think COVID has to some extent thrown us into it, where smaller law firms are now anyway interacting with their clients online. And I think building on that, sharing documents, sharing timelines for transactions, further to what Richard's saying, or agreeing with what Richard's saying, productizing what you can to create productized, repeatable usage, efficiencies there. But I think a key thing is, what cloud-based type solutions can you be using to focus on the needs of your clients who want that personal service, but who can't afford to spend a fortune. And equally, the smaller law firms can't necessarily go and invest and build their own bespoke platforms, but leverage what's out there in terms of technology, and which is increasingly affordable now with the use of cloud.
I've got a question which I know is on the tip of everybody's tongue, because Bruce, we're doing an interview between both yourself, Richard, and Bruce. What is Deloitte's legal goals regarding the legal services for the next decade? If you're able to share any insights, or is that a don't go there question?
No, I mean, I can't share exact specifics, obviously, but what are our goals? Very much along the pillars that I mentioned. Definitely further build out our legal advisory capabilities in select areas of law. So we're not going to cover the whole market in terms of all practice areas, but in select areas, we're going to build out our capabilities, absolutely. And as Richard mentioned, we're still quite an early stage business in terms of Deloitte Legal, particularly in the UK and some of our other jurisdictions more established. So build that side out of things, build out far more our managed legal services. So I mentioned that as one of our key pillars. And again, it's early days in that space, and we're going to be building that out a lot more. Build out our consulting capabilities even further. So along those, that as the third pillar I mentioned. And then, of course, technology, for technology to be a core component of each of those. So how we deliver managed services must be in a very digitized manner, both in terms of how we do it from an efficiency perspective, data perspective, and from a client experience perspective. The same way with our advisory services and the consulting side. And then I think a key area that I'm personally very focused on, coming back to Jodie's question around what new ideas for new digital legal solutions can we create to take new solutions to the market, not just to automate what we're currently doing or what is currently happening in legal services, but to be more transformative, create new types of solutions to address legal needs, going back to Richard's point of starting with a client, what are their challenges, how we can address those challenges, but not just by making our lawyers more efficient and giving them online portals, but creating a totally new solutions, platform types of solutions, inevitably elements of AI, data analytics to address clients' needs. So our ambition is to address all of those across those three key strands, plus the digital solutions. And our ambitions are big. We've got ambitions to grow significantly. But at the same time, back to the point that I made, we want to collaborate with the tech companies out there. One thing that I want to stress, which I haven't mentioned so far, is we're not looking at competing with legal tech companies. We're not looking at building our own tech from scratch. It's about collaborating with tech companies out there. I mentioned Deloitte has got alliances with big tech companies. Equally, we want to build alliances with legal tech companies and take solutions to market together, where it's not just about the tech, but it's combining the tech with legal expertise to take new solutions to market to address clients' challenges. So very much in terms of our ambitions, as part of achieving our ambitions, doing it collaboratively with the legal tech ecosystem and equally with law firms who will bring their areas of expertise to the table, but maybe not the same technology capabilities as the whole of Deloitte will have, collaborating with law firms. So very much doing it in a collaborative way.
No, thank you, Bruce. I don't know if we're able to ask one more question. I am conscious of the time, and thank you for everyone sort of listening in. As I said, there is a lot of questions which we haven't yet been able to answer. So I apologise.
I don't have a train to catch.
Well, yeah, neither do I. Bruce, are you able
I'm
to
fine.
a couple more?
I'm fine.
Perfect. So this is from Sophie Kazmi. Do you think that lawyers and law firms are holding back on the full potential of legal tech for fear of the risk it could pose to their own value?
Yes, I think it's a very good question. Thank you for that. I'm not sure it's ever a conscious, almost conspiratorial approach that's taken, but I often say, and forgive me, those who've heard this before, I often say when I'm speaking to a room full of successful lawyers, it's hard to convince a room full of millionaires that they've got their business model wrong. But the reality is, for many years, you've run a successful business on one approach, and that approach has been substantially without technology. It's quite hard to motivate a practice into using technology where the current system doesn't seem broken. Any serious theorists and practitioners of change will say you have to start with a sense of urgency, a burning platform, a melting iceberg. But the reality is, for about 30 years straight, we've seen, until quite recently, increasingly successful law firms based on the old advisory model, and if not in fact through hourly building, certainly in spirit. And so I don't think, and I never hear when I advise boards, people rubbing their hands together and saying, how can we avoid legal technology? But people do say, well, how can we next year perform as we did last year, perhaps a little better, because it was a great year and legal technology doesn't figure that highly. So when a Bruce or a Richard comes along and points to a brave new world, the motivation for them to change historically has not been there. But again, this is what's so significant about COVID, because suddenly even the most skeptical partners and even the most successful law firms realized they had to embrace technology far more comprehensively than they had done in the past. And again, Bruce's earlier point, this hopefully will have opened their eyes to different ways of doing business. And because the market's going to be so tough for years to come in any event, I think we'll see an openness to different business models, to new ways of delivering legal services. And so it's a horrible thing to say, but a silver lining here, I think, of the tragedy is that it'll lead to more efficient technology-enabled service. But for those partners who said, I don't believe in technology for its own sake and our business is doing really well, clients aren't clamoring for change, competitors aren't outperforming us or undercutting us, I think technology will be important, but in the late 20s rather than the early 20s. To some extent, one can have sympathy with that. But the timescales have shifted for the reasons we've been discussing in this session.
Yeah, in my experience, pretty much the same. In all my dealings with lawyers, I've never explicitly had any of them say, no, we don't want to do this because we feel it's going to threaten our practice or threaten how we do things. I think it's just been that burning platform hasn't necessarily been there to compel them to change. And they've been, had successful practices without necessarily adopting big technological transformation. And I think a big thing, in addition to COVID, of course, clients are changing that. GCs, legal COOs are pushing for change, not necessarily explicitly saying use technology, but what they're looking for implies that technology has to be used in order to address those needs, whether it's reporting, analytics, online, or efficiency initiatives. So I think partners in law firms are realizing that they need to adopt it, but it's changed now. They're adopting it because they need to, but I don't think their lack of adopting it previously was protectionist in any way. It was more they just didn't see the urgency.
Thank you. We've got, I'm going to, she says, looking through all the questions, we've still got about 22 to go. So it's great, but I am conscious, obviously, of time. So this is from Tanya Mason. How do you get firms to move away from the billable hour? We often come up against the firm's financial director on ROI when we don't always charge on a fixed fee basis.
I've been thinking about it for many decades. In the end, I think the drive for this has to come from clients, not from law firms. There are all sorts of good commercial reasons, actually, for law firms to continue charging on an hourly billing basis. From the client's point of view, I continue to think in about 90% of cases it doesn't make sense. But it's always surprised me that lawyers in in-house legal departments often default to hourly billing. But that said, I think that law firms, when they come forward with alternative billing strategies, have got to be challenged, because there's been a lot of claims made of alternative billing. And if you ask some simple questions like, will you be less profitable if you deliver your service according to this new billing strategy? And are you going to be working differently if you embrace this new billing strategy? If most law firms answer these questions no, then you see alternative billing strategies for what they actually are, which is a slightly tweaked version of hourly billing. And for me, the whole issue of hourly billing is beginning to miss the point. For me, it's not about charging or billing differently, it's about working differently. Because the real savings aren't going to come from, say, taking 20% off associates' hourly rates. The real savings are going to come from that work being undertaken through advanced technology, either on its own or being driven by paralegals at far lower costs. And so I think the fixation, as there has been, on alternative billing as the answer to the more for less challenge is in fact misjudged. I think you need to look more strategically at it. The challenge is to deliver and work differently, not simply to bill differently.
Bruce, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen over the last years is that there's been quite a shift away from hourly billing to fixed fee. I think it depends on the type of work. I think there's also a big difference depending on which jurisdiction. Like, for example, my sense of things, and it's not just my own sense, it's talking to people, etc. The UK, for example, has moved far more quickly to fixed fee billing than the US, for example, where it's more hourly billing. It also depends whether you're talking about transactional work or transactional and advisory versus litigation. But there's been a big move towards fixed fee work. I totally agree with Richard. That in itself is not going to change things. But I do think it has driven some of the growing focus on looking at process optimization, looking at using technology, looking at efficiency initiatives. Have those just been, to use Richard's terminology, automation rather than transformation? Probably, but I think the move to hourly billing, to fixed fee work has driven that to some extent, because at the end of the day, if you're still on hourly billing, what's the incentive to be more efficient? So there has been some change, and I think there'll be more of it. Yeah, and I think part of that will drive some of the behavior, but that in itself is not enough. I agree with Richard. One still needs to look at fundamentally how you deliver services.
Any last thoughts, gentlemen? Because I think it would be good to put the questions there. Any last thoughts?
I was just noticing a question from Mirabella. This is slightly lighthearted. Who wants? I think it was Mirabella who wanted to ask, what's the difference between law tech and legal tech? And in my mind, there's no difference. They're synonymous. That might be nice to finish in a definitional question.
Last thoughts from me. Yeah, it's been great having this discussion, great engaging with the questions out there. interesting to see a lot of our challenges are similar across different organizations. I think, yes, of course, the current crisis we're in, yeah, a lot of negative to it, of course, in the wider environment. But I think, as we've discussed on this call, I think it's going to accelerate some of the change in the industry, the ways of working, the adoption of tech. And I think we all need to obviously buckle down through the current crisis. But I think when we emerge from it, I think there's some interesting opportunities and transformation that'll come of it. So I think some interesting times ahead.
Bruce, I should say thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your current position and your thinking and where the legal market's going so openly with us. You've got one of the most interesting jobs, I think, in the legal tech community. So we wish you well.
No, thank you, Richard. It's been great being here, and yeah, happy to share. I mean, what's amazed me since coming into legal tech a good few years ago is the sense of community in the legal tech space, and how even across different law firms, people within reason, obviously, sharing ideas, collaborating, supporting each other. So yeah, it's great to be part of this.
No, thank you both. So thank you so much, Bruce, for making the time and being able to join us today on Legal Tech Talks. And Richard, thank you again. And you know, it's a great interview, great being able to have this kind of open discussion. And thank you for everyone sharing your thoughts and questions. So we look forward to welcoming you at the next Legal Tech Talks, which will be next week. So thank you, and we look forward to speaking to you again.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, Richard.
Bye.
Thanks for answering. Bye.